Hey everyone, welcome back. This is the Sideways Upward Podcast, episode 3, and today we have an interesting one for you. We're going to be giving some practical advice as well as analyzing a few more companies that we feel do things just a little bit differently. I'm your host, Erim. I'm joined by Brian, and we have a third guest today. Brian, who do we got with us?
Unfortunately, Mr. Worldwide, he was charging a very high rate to be our third co-host. So we had to leave him and we put an industry plant in his place. And this is him.
Yeah, I hope he doesn't leave us either.
Yeah, hopefully he doesn't leave us. That'd be too much.
He doesn't branch out into a new career.
So what's the theme for today?
The theme for today is called Cutting Out the Middleman. So this came upon us this week where we were just talking about a stock that we found some news out that the stock is Hims. So if you don't know Hims, it's a direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical company, and they just announced that they're coming out with testosterone boosters, which I feel is pretty huge, right?
Yeah, I mean, that whole industry, whether it's boosting testosterone, hair loss, weight loss, all of these things are really big industries. And a lot of times the hardest part of getting access to them is going through a doctor or PCP to try to get a prescription to then get access to these medications, which can take much longer. And you may or may not have access to it. Hims cuts that out completely, makes it very simple to get access to these medications without the need of having to go through that middleman.
Exactly.
In this case.
Exactly. And they're not the first ones to have that kind of business model, but I think they're a very good example of the types of companies that there's companies that they grow big by combining things together. For example, Robinhood is one we talked about, that they combine credit card with IRA and now with stock trading options and bringing all these things into one package. But I think Hims is a good company that their whole business model is bypassing traditional routes. For example, before, you'd have to go through a doctor if you wanted to get some treatment for male pattern baldness, which I'm a relevant client for that. And then they also have some certain medicines for helping with sexual dysfunction, things of that nature. So I think they made a lot of ground by just offering this directly to the consumer. What you do is you just go on their website, right? You know how easy it is. You answer a questionnaire. You get connected with a doctor. It's all done without even having to leave your house. And then you just wait, and in the package comes your prescription medication. And this company is very interesting because they keep finding new medications, new paths to offer different kinds of medicines to people that traditionally they have to go through a doctor for.
Well, yeah, and to be fair, we are in like an era now where like getting access to a lot of these medications that just get FDA approval and they're just getting on the market. And for example, the weight loss drugs like semaglutide and tirzepatide and all of these, they're fairly new, right? And Hims is trying to really tackle this market as well because, the way they see it is, why are these bigger companies like Novo and Eli Lilly charging these ridiculous amounts to these consumers for buying those brand name drugs when you could get a compounded version of it and for much cheaper and go through Hims, which cuts out the middleman of having to go through a doctor who prescribes you the brand name drug and all of this stuff, which they make a lot of money and so does Novo Nordisk. Whereas Hims just cuts that out completely and says, here's the compounded version and, there's your solution and it's much cheaper in the long run. So I think Hims is I like that they're starting to see this as like a path forward. Like, there's also like some drugs that are not yet FDA approved and stuff, like mostly in the peptide space for like muscle growth and weight loss and all these things that are on the horizon, which I'm sure Hims is keeping an eye on to immediately start providing access to their consumers once it does get FDA approval. So yeah, I think it's really good for them to go down this route and basically cutting out that middleman is way better for the consumer in the long, like at the end of the day, it's just way better. It's a simpler process, makes it more efficient.
Yeah, and they're not the first company to, like I said, have this kind of business model. I remember when I got my Tesla back in 2018, the Model 3 had just come out, and I found it really fascinating that you didn't have to go to a dealership. Traditional means of getting a car is you go to a dealership, you have to haggle, you have to negotiate. You're in this high-pressure situation where you're not going to get the best price. You don't even know what the end price will be usually.
Right.
You know, you're going back and forth, and it just depends how good of a negotiator you are. And then Tesla comes in. They don't have any dealerships. They didn't back when I got it. They were just starting out. They were selling direct to consumer. They had their own store where you do your deliveries. And that was pretty much a game changer back then. I think they were the first ones to do that.
Yeah, and even today, their dealerships are not real dealerships. They're not going to sell you a car there. They're just going to do exactly what you can do at home, which is go online, make your order, and then you have to wait for it to get delivered to your house. So they still to this day don't really have true dealerships. I mean, they're like more showrooms than anything, where you can maybe see the cars and service your own car, but they're not actual dealerships. A similar one is Carvana. Carvana has a similar thing. They have the showrooms essentially, which are like, they look like kind of vending machines for cars, but realistically, where you're going to place the order is going to be online. And the best part about that is you actually get all the fees provided to you up front. So you know the exact final cost without any of the dealer fees and stuff tacked on that they do in traditional dealerships, where like you have one figure and then by the time you're done, hours later, you have a whole different figure that's way higher because they tacked on all these fees without telling you. So these new wave dealerships, which are mostly online, that's the benefit of them, is you know exactly what you're paying up front with no...
Exactly.
You know,
I think Carvana, you don't even have to leave your house. They come pick up your old car.
Oh yeah,
and
make it super simple.
they bring the new one to you.
Yep.
Like that's as convenient as it gets. So it's no wonder why they're exploding with popularity.
Exactly.
And there's other companies that follow the same model. There's Warby Parker. If you don't know them, they're an eyewear company. Traditionally, you would have to go to certain department stores or Macy's or JCPenney or whatever, and to buy your eyewear, there'd be a markup because that's a middleman that's involved. There's the designer, the manufacturer, and then there's the distributor, the retailer. And you're paying that retailer. They're going to add their own cut. They're going to add their own margin. They need to make a profit too. So by opening their own brand and selling direct to consumer, Warby Parker was able to just cut out the middleman. They're offering a better price to you in the end.
Yeah, that's true. Harry's is another example. Essentially, all of these companies have something similar. They're all direct to consumer, right? They're basically cutting out these middleman consumers or resellers, and they're just selling it directly to the consumer, which essentially becomes cheaper for both sides, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, an example of something on the other side, which is not this process of direct to consumer, would be drop shippers, for example. Drop shippers that you normally see on Amazon, they're actually they're charging you more because they buy it for cheap directly from the source, and then they sell it to you at a markup so they can make profit. And then the people who are buying it on Amazon are actually buying a product much more expensive than they can be if they just went directly to the source. So you have a lot of experience. You work in the industry as well, where you're selling things directly to consumers, but you also have resellers in the middle at times. But you encourage people to buy it directly from your company because it incentivizes you from the company perspective, but it also incentivizes the user by getting more of a discount. Yeah.
A tip for you guys is if you're shopping for a product, try to locate the manufacturer if you're not sure who it is, and go to their website directly. Call them if you need to and say you want to buy direct. Because all of these places like Amazon, eBay, and Walmart, they're taking their own cut in the same way. So that's what Warby Parker did. And then both parties are benefiting because they're getting a direct sale, you're getting a better price. They don't have to factor in that margin for the middleman. So one tip we suggest is to, instead of buying just everything on Amazon, just go directly to the source. And
this doesn't apply only to business too. Like just in general, let's say you have something to tell somebody, instead of telling somebody else, you go directly to the source and tell them. You can cut out the middleman. Makes things better in the long run. It's always better to think of things in terms of steps and try to cut out some steps in the middle to make the process more efficient and better. Yeah. Whether that be in business, whether that be in your social aspect or life. It's always better to cut out any kind of steps in the middle that are making it more difficult from you getting from point A to point B.
Yeah, that's a good challenge for myself, actually, and one that I encourage you guys to think about. I'm in a position of leadership, and instead of when I see somebody doing something that maybe I think they could do better or I'm not a fan of, instead of telling their manager or telling someone to tell them for me, I'll just go directly to them and have that one-on-one conversation. Cut out anyone else that they don't need to know their mistake. It's just for my own knowledge. So that will foster a deeper connection with that personnel as well.
That's true.
Do you have a good connection with your manager? Do they speak with you directly usually, or do they kind of skirt around and try to have other people tell you?
Well,
things?
I mean, it's hard to tell. I mean, a lot of times I do have a good relationship with people above me, and I express to them whatever I have an issue with, and I'm hoping they express to me whatever they have an issue with. It seems like that's the case, so it's always better to just have that direct communication as opposed to going through other means, because if you gossip, whether that's in the workplace or anywhere, it's always going to come back to haunt you. So it's better to just go directly to the source, confront things, and then just resolve it in the moment.
Exactly. One thing employers, I think, appreciate is if you go direct to them when you're applying for a job. I was watching one podcaster, and he said that he was hiring a position in his company, and the person he hired was the one that had directly either called or hand wrote a letter, and he picked her because she showed the most initiative. When you go direct to somebody, you're showing initiative, that you're not taking the path of least resistance. You're actually wanting to build a bond that's stronger than had you just gone through a third party. So one challenge that we can give to people is to find a middleman in your life and cut them out and just go direct to the source, whether it's a potential employer or what have you. Middlemen are everywhere, and I think it's better for everyone to find ways to put them out of the equation.
And a question we have for you is also think of anything in your life, whether it be processes or products, in which you have a certain list of steps from point A to point B, and think about each one of those steps and how you can maybe cut out 1 or 2 or 3 or who knows how many steps in order to make that process more efficient or the product more efficient at the end of the day. Because that's what a lot of these companies are doing, right? Like these companies that are very successful, they're basically thinking of it in that way. Here's the starting point, which would be the consumer placing an order, right, to the finish line, which is them receiving the product, and all the steps in between. If you're able to take out as many steps as possible, make it simpler for the consumer to get access to the product or the process, the service, whatever it is, at the end of the day, the consumer is going to be happier, and they're going to like that experience better than the opposing experience.
Yeah.
So,
put yourself in the shoes of someone that's putting out stuff as well, like a content creator or a writer or musician. They would appreciate it so much if you went directly to their website and bought their book or their music. So
another example of this actually is, so I work in the biotech space, as I've mentioned before, and I work as a design engineer, so I'm really thinking about like the processes, the systems, and everything at work. One main pain point that we get from our consumers are that they don't like how long it takes for them to onboard onto our system, meaning for them to get started with it, because there's a bunch of steps in between. So as a design engineer, I think of how can I make that more efficient? How can I still get the same relevant information we need, baseline, the required information we need from our consumers, but make the steps for them to get from point A to point B much simpler, much quicker, right? We want them to be more efficient. We want them to be onboarded quicker, because that's a big pain point that these consumers have. And the issue with that is kind of having the retention rates go down and all of that. If they might just quit if it takes too long, and they're just like, they'll put it off and then get to it later kind of thing. And you don't want that. So anytime you have any kind of service or product, you also got to think of it as that. It's not just selling. It's also like when you do have a product that you're trying to provide to a user, make it as user friendly as possible. Make it more efficient. Try to reduce the amount of steps. A lot of companies do this, Netflix, Apple, a lot of companies that really focus on the user experience, they really think about all these like little steps. These friction points, these barriers that make it harder, like basically frustrate the user, right? And make them back out of it. So That's why thinking of things in terms of steps, whether it be processes, products, like I said, that's the best way to think of things, because then you start noticing the ones that you can potentially eliminate or make more efficient to be able to have a better user experience at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, there's one strategy when we're doing sales called greasing the sales funnel, because there's a funnel, you have audience, and then you have the interested shoppers, and then you have the people that are trying to buy your product. And how can you grease that funnel? How can you remove that friction so that they go down the sales funnel much easier? Any click, that extra click that they have to do on your website, that's a lost sale, because that's adding friction to the process. So if you run a website or you have a store, think of ways to minimize that friction. Amazon did a great job with that one-click button that they have.
Yep.
Can you imagine that? It's so easy now to just buy something, even if it's $500. It's just one click, and that's obviously working very well for them. So that's another tip or challenge we have, is to find these friction points and eliminate them, because your business will be better off in the long run.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. Is there any cases where this couldn't work, or what are the challenges and risks associated with this protocol?
Yeah, there's one that comes to mind. So Nike is very famous for having basically started off as a company that not just sold you their products directly from their store, but they would also sell it through resellers. Mm-hmm. And Nike obviously is one of the bigger companies ever, and they grew their brand. They were very well established. But then their CEO decided to pivot. I guess he got very greedy, and he said, we want to cut out the middleman. We want to cut out the resellers. And we want to go direct to consumer only with our stores. So we want you to only be able to buy Nike products through Nike.com.
They got too aggressive.
They got too aggressive with it, and turns out they started losing a ton of money. And it's if you look at the stock price, you'll notice that it went down a lot, and they started getting a lot more competition, because the competition would rely on the resellers and would also sell on their stores, just like Nike used to do. Mm-hmm. Well, so Nike realized that. They ended up changing their CEO, and then their new CEO, the one that's currently working there, who used to be an intern for the company, rose up the ranks, and now he's the CEO. He is now moving back to their original philosophy, which was, let's sell in the resellers and let's sell on Nike.com. Mm-hmm. Because he realized that you should try to reduce these friction points, right? And so the point here is, if you want to be successful, you got to lean towards your original approach. So if your original approach was, let's do resale and let's do direct to consumer, we keep it as is. You can't remove one, because now you're basically removing half of your demographic of people of your consumers that used to buy from your products. And most likely they're not going to realize that you just removed all of that and now you can buy it on Nike.com. They're just going to move on to some other brand. So in that case, you need to be careful. You can't, if you want this to be successful, you have to start off in the direct-to-consumer space only. Mm-hmm. For example, like the ones we mentioned earlier, Warby Parker, Harry's, these kind of companies that started off with direct-to-consumer only and then potentially move into the resale space.
Yeah.
But you can't do what Nike did, which is start off in both, remove one, and then basically leave your consumers kind of confused, and then have to revert back to your original approach.
I feel like it's a balancing act. Like, these distributors, they are kind of your salespeople too. They kind of are putting your name out there and spreading you around, and you're seen in more places in a way. So you could say, don't they deserve a cut too? Yeah, maybe. But on an individual level, I still feel like going direct to the source, you will get a probably better price in the end, or you should, if that manufacturer is any smart. If they want to make that sale, maybe it's unethical, but they should get the end user the best price in the end, or the best deal, even though maybe they didn't find them initially directly. Mm-hmm. If they made the work to get to the direct source, they should probably be rewarded for it.
Yeah,
what do you think about that?
No, I agree. I mean, if a consumer is buying it directly from the source, they should get some kind of incentive for doing so, as opposed to going through a reseller. Go ahead.
Yeah, one field that I noticed this oddly doesn't work is in travel. What do you call travel brokers or
travel agencies? Mm-hmm.
Travel agencies like Expedia. For some reason, whenever I book travel, it's always the most expensive to do it on the airline's direct site.
Yeah.
Expedia or Booking.com will usually have a better price. And I mean, who knows? Maybe there's a trade-off to that. Maybe it's harder to cancel if you do it through Expedia. But I found that Expedia, maybe they have even better customer service as well. Like they're offering both the better price and the better customer service. So
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's dependent on the type of travel you're doing or where you're traveling to, the dates and stuff. Because sometimes it is actually cheaper to buy it through directly through like the airline or the hotel itself. It all depends. But I have also noticed that sometimes travel agencies do provide better rates. But once you get to that final screen, the checkout screen, you're going to notice a lot of fees tagged on, right?
the Spirit method.
Yeah, basically, you're going to notice a lot of fees tacked on. So you really have to weigh kind of like the final results for both. But that is a good example. Sometimes you do have the middleman that can provide you better rates, and that applies to brokers, whether that's insurance, travel, you name it. Sometimes they do actually. It's in their benefit to find you lower rates and to help you save money. It's in their benefit to do so.
I mean, it's a very interesting dynamic where you have a broker that's putting in work and effort, and they're getting you a better price than the end company itself. How is that possible? In some cases, like insurance, for example, you want to get insurance, using a broker to just find you the best rate, and they're taking no commission from you. The insurance company is paying them. What's the argument against that?
I mean, there's one company that is kind of going against that, as Lemonade, which is an insurance that's direct to consumer, cutting out the middleman, which is the broker, and they are relatively cheap. But honestly, that space in general there aren't many companies like Lemonade or these insurance companies. They want you to rely on these bigger insurance companies, and then an insurance broker, would try to find you the best rate out of all of them instead of you having to do all the digging and going through all these individual insurance companies.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a business where you're selling direct to the consumer, but you also have resellers and distributors, it's a little bit of a balancing act to keep them happy, but have prices uniform across the board. For example, implementing a minimum advertised price policy that everybody must obey will prevent those issues where people just avoid you directly or they avoid them and upset them. It's a level playing field. So if you own a business that distributes products, that's one highly common concept to use. So, but it's either doing that and knowing the correct moderation, or just picking one or the other. For example, Tesla, they don't have distributors. If you want to buy a Tesla, you have to buy from Tesla.
You know what I don't like is when you have to go through a company website or something, and then they don't give you a quote. They say, put in your information and we'll reach out to give you a quote or we'll give you something.
I don't even go to them when they do that.
Right. So that turns down a lot of consumers, right? But you would be surprised to know that a lot of these insurance companies and a lot of these types of like companies where they do typically have brokers, they will have that kind of thing in place in their websites where it's like, put in your information and we'll reach out to you with a quote, which to me is like, you're just, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, why are you adding that friction point? Why can't you just tell me directly? I gave you my information. Tell me directly what is it that I will pay?
When I think of that strategy, I think this guy's just trying to make a quick buck.
Right.
They're not thinking with longevity, with long term, because if you just provide that transparency to the consumer, they're gonna feel a lot better about you than if you're trying to be sleazy and say,
it makes me feel like they're just trying to scam the consumer, give them a higher price than what it normally costs.
Putting in a high pressure situation.
And then it makes me also feel like, am I allowed to haggle this price? Because if this is basically not a standard,
flexible.
This is not a standard quote. This is just some price you're throwing at me. Why can't I negotiate that? Right? So yeah, it's a little weird whenever I see that, and I tend to avoid companies in general that do that on their websites. Like if I notice that that's what they're doing, I avoid them.
One thing I've realized over the years is that everything is negotiable. Even if it's a set in stone price on a menu or something, it's negotiable. Like just.
Well, I don't think I could go to a pizza place and be like, hey, that $10 pizza? No, I'm paying $6. That's the most.
Well, you could say I got a stomach virus last time I ate here. How about a discount?
I don't know about that.
Unethical. If we want to get into unethical hacking, then that's But no, I think it doesn't hurt to ask at least. Just ask. You're checking into a hotel. You say, hey, do you have any premium rooms available or something like that? so many times I got upgraded, or getting on a flight, and you say, "Is there any business available with empty seats?" So a couple times I've gotten that upgrade.
Yeah, but not everybody's gonna have the same benefit, right? A lot of times it also is based on your status, like especially with airlines. If you don't really fly with airlines much or you don't do anything, they're not gonna just randomly be like, yeah, sure, let's put you in business class. No, I've tried it. I've never been that lucky. But if you do travel a lot, then they will obviously notice and they'll be like, okay, yeah, we do have this available. Feel free to take it, blah blah or whatever. So. That all depends, but yeah, most things I think are negotiable. Like I think you should be able to, just ask and see if you can get a better price, a better rate, whatever it might be. But
when you go to the manufacturer's site directly, this is what you do. You negotiate with them, and you say, "I'm going to directly. Can you cut me a good deal?" And most of the time, I think they will do at least better than had they sold it through a third party and then they got way less margin. So they're gonna pass that benefit on to you.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, some customers, they say, "Can I pick up your product and save you the shipping and you help me out?" It's a win-win. You're avoiding the middleman of a shipping company, because shipping is another cost for the distributor. If you ever buy from a site that says free shipping, and then you talk to them and you say, "Oh, I'd rather pick it up from you," they're gonna pass those shipping savings on to you. That's another tip, if you're shopping locally at least.
Yeah, I mean, just make sure you're respectful when you're reaching out. You're not entitled. You're not.
Yeah, don't demand anything. Don't assume you'll get anything.
Yeah.
But just asking, the worst they could say is no.
Yeah. So that's a good point, a good tip for you guys.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about cutting out the middleman. We talked about maybe upping your negotiation skills, and we talked about finding the balance between that strategy of keeping people around you happy that are distributing your products potentially versus selling direct. We also talked about going direct to the end person you're trying to reach, whether that's a potential employer, instead of just applying on their website through a portal where it's going to get lost in an ocean of different applications. Just send a letter. Nobody even sends letters anymore nowadays, but if you handwrite a letter with a cover page and your resume, I guarantee you someone is gonna
make sure you send it through a carrier pigeon also.
Yeah, so and spray with perfume and a lipstick with a kiss on man, just spice things up. But I think we have some good challenges for you this week, some good tips. Number one is cut out one middleman. Find one pathway in your life where instead of going like a curve like this, you just go direct.
Number two could be, think of like product or processes in which there's certain layers or steps in between, and try to think about how you can cut out maybe one of those steps to make your process more efficient, and put it down in the comments as to what that might be. I'm sure in your day-to-day you probably have certain steps you go through or processes you might be doing, or even a product you're working on, and which requires certain steps in between. And if you start thinking about those, you might notice some that are making your process a little bit less efficient. So by cutting it out, you might be either speeding up the process or making it simpler to perform.
Do you have any examples of one that's you want to try to cut out? For example, I want to talk more directly to the people that are I'm in charge of, or that I'm being managed by me, instead of just talking to people in similar positions. Say this person is doing this, I'd rather go directly to that person and have a one-on-one with them and have kind of a deeper connection that way.
Yeah, for me, it's going to the gym, so I'll probably just cut out brushing my teeth, eating breakfast. No, I'm kidding.
Just cut out brushing your teeth, just rip your teeth out so that you don't have nothing to take care of anymore.
No, like I mentioned earlier, I do this on a daily basis with the products that I work on. Is essentially, there's always a layer of steps in between any service that we're providing, or the design. For example, if you have steps in between, like a design process, like I mentioned earlier, like the onboarding of a process, or for example, the checkout process you mentioned with Amazon. If you can minimize the amount of steps that a user takes to get from point A to point B in that process for the product, then it makes the user experience better, and it makes that user want to buy more of your product or be more involved with the services that you provide as a company.
Yeah. Basically, if you're looking for results, it doesn't have to be sales, it could be anything. If you're looking for any results, how can you remove friction from the equation? There's always another way to lubricate the sales funnel or remove friction, and we want you guys to think about maybe one way you can do it and get back to us next week with your results.
Yep. So thank you, everybody.
We'll leave you there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Sideways upward.
Sideways upward.